Missouri's highest peak might be hiding an entire city made of silver. Welcome to a journey into the rugged heart of the Ozarks, where Taum Sauk Mountain looms large. This isn't just a high point on a map. This mountain allegedly conceals the lost Silver City. We are diving headfirst into this historical mystery, blending deep folklore, cold geological facts, and the desperate failed quests of generations of treasure hunters. Did a glittering metropolis truly exist, built from pure silver high in these rugged hills? Or is this just a shimmering mirage of wishful thinking that has consumed fortunes and lives? Stay with us as we piece together the tantalizing hints that keep this myth alive and discover why the lure of Taum Sauk's hidden wealth continues to draw modern-day adventurers. You will learn the true story behind one of North America's most persistent and costly treasure legends. Was this city built by an ancient vanished civilization or by desperate Spanish conquistadors? What happens when hard science clashes with glittering hope? What price do people pay for the promise of hidden wealth? The towering presence of Taum Sauk Mountain defines this mystery. This is Missouri's highest point, but it feels less like a peak and more like the rugged backbone of the entire Ozark Range. Covered in dense, unforgiving forest, the mountain sits deep within the St. Francois Mountains, a region known for its ancient, dramatic landscape. The sheer remoteness of this location is the first clue as to why a lost city could theoretically remain undiscovered for centuries. Traveling here, even today, requires determination. Picture a landscape carved from some of the oldest bedrock in North America, a place where the earth itself tells a story millions of years in the making. Geologically, the area is rich in iron and other minerals, which has fueled industry for generations. However, this is where the glittering hope of the legend slightly falters against cold science. Silver is not a highly prevalent mineral in the region. To find enough silver to build an entire city would defy nearly everything we know about the Ozarks subsurface. Yet, its very difficulty makes Taum Sauk the perfect hiding place. It is a location that is both stunningly beautiful and utterly intimidating. The dark, shadowed slopes and deep ravines promise both secrets and exhaustion to anyone who dares to search. This mountain has always held a powerful significance. Its name is thought to derive from a local Osage chief named Sauk, linking its history deeply to the indigenous people who navigated these heights long before European settlers arrived with their tales of gold and silver. This mountain stands as the silent, unyielding centerpiece of our tale. It represents a place where historical depth meets geographical challenge, where the lure of a lost metropolis clashes directly with the reality of rugged terrain. The mountain serves as the ultimate guard, protecting its own secrets and forcing generations of hopeful treasure hunters to reckon with its sheer scale and difficulty. Could an entire civilization have engineered a city of silver in this formidable location and then simply vanished into the shadows of the forest? The true origin of this glittering fantasy likely started as a whisper. Before the arrival of European fortune seekers, the Ozark Mountains belonged to the Native American tribes, most notably the Osage. Their intimate knowledge of the land, passed down through generations, contained the first clues about the mountain's secrets. This is where we find the original stories of a shining place. The Osage considered the St. Francois Mountains, including Taum Sauk, to be deeply sacred territory. These were not just hunting grounds, but spiritual centers. Their oral traditions spoke of unusual rock formations and caves that sometimes contained strange minerals that glimmered in the sunlight. These weren't necessarily descriptions of highly refined silver, but rather of natural occurrences that profoundly impressed those who lived close to the land. For example, the area is rich in galena, a common lead sulfide ore that is silvery and metallic in appearance. Imagine encountering a vast deposit of this shimmering, heavy rock. To an early observer, it would certainly suggest immense mineral wealth and could easily be misinterpreted or exaggerated as pure silver. These natural geological phenomena, viewed through a lens of deep respect and awe, became the foundation for the later European myths. When explorers and surveyors arrived with the singular obsession of finding gold and silver, they encountered these existing tribal stories. They interpreted the native people's descriptions of shimmering rocks and unusual metallic deposits not as natural galena or striking quartz, but as definitive proof of a hidden city or a vast mine. The reverence the Osage held for the mountain was instantly twisted into a clue about a secret treasure. The oral histories, which may have been cautionary tales about dangerous caves or spiritually significant sites, were reframed as maps leading to unimaginable riches. This blending of ancient lore with European greed created a powerful narrative, providing a sense of antiquity and legitimacy to the legend. It suggested that even the first inhabitants knew the mountain held an extraordinary secret, a shining place waiting to be found. This early promise amplified the mountain's mystique and launched centuries of frantic, often disastrous, expeditions. The arrival of Europeans changed the whispers into shouts. These explorers saw the shimmering place not as sacred ground, but as a prize to be claimed. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the fever for silver had become an epidemic across the New World. This was the era of El Dorado, the legendary city of gold, believed to exist somewhere in the uncharted wilderness. The Ozarks, far from the coasts, were considered prime territory for such magnificent hidden wealth. Spanish conquistadors and later French fur traders and prospectors pushed deep into the North American interior, driven by the singular obsession of extracting riches and bringing them back to Europe. When these men encountered the vast St. Francois Mountains, their minds immediately jumped to the possibility of silver. In the European imagination, mountains were synonymous with mineral veins. If there were peaks, there must be treasure. The French, who established early settlements in what is now Missouri, were particularly keen on finding valuable deposits. They were aware of the lead and iron, but they desperately sought the more precious metals. Early expeditions scouting the waterways and the rugged terrain noted the unusual density of metallic ores around the Taum Sauk area. While most of these discoveries turned out to be lead or iron, the sheer quantity of these heavy metals kept the hope alive. The idea was simple but powerful. Where there is lead, silver is often near. Prospectors interpreted every shiny rock, every isolated piece of galena, and every indigenous tale as confirmation that they were only inches away from a massive silver strike. This intense, almost desperate mindset transformed the entire region into a giant treasure map. Maps were drawn, claims were staked, and the first serious, funded hunts for the lost Silver City began. These were not lone adventurers with shovels, but organized expeditions backed by wealthy men in St. Louis and New Orleans. They were searching for something far grander than a simple mine shaft. They were looking for a deposit so immense it could only be described as a city built of the precious metal. The legends of the shimmering place now had the full weight of European colonialism behind them, turning ancient folklore into the focus of intense commercial speculation. But these early searches were brutal and ultimately fruitless, ending in exhausted men and empty coffers. This continuous cycle of hope and failure only seemed to deepen the legend, suggesting that if it was this difficult to find, it must be unimaginably valuable. The harsh reality of the Ozark wilderness ensured that the secret, whatever it was, remained perfectly protected. The persistent failure to find the treasure only magnified the myth. The idea evolved from a rich silver mine into something far more spectacular, the definitive legend of the lost Silver City itself. This was not merely a vein of ore or a cache of silver coins. This was an entire metropolis, a place so rich it defied belief. The popular version of the tale holds that a civilization, sometimes identified as an ancient, vanished people, or perhaps a group of Spanish colonists who were incredibly secretive and industrious, somehow built a permanent settlement high on the unforgiving slopes of Taum Sauk. The city was allegedly constructed almost entirely from the precious metal. Imagine streets paved not with cobblestone or asphalt, but with slabs of pure silver that shimmered under the moonlight. The houses themselves were said to be built from the heavily concentrated silver ore found in the mountain, creating structures that were both solid and breathtakingly radiant. At the center of this impossible city, the stories claimed, stood a magnificent structure, perhaps a church or a temple, whose roof was plated in pure, beaten silver, visible only during certain hours of the day when the sun struck it just right. The overwhelming image was one of incredible wealth and profound mystery, a civilization so rich it could afford to substitute silver for common building materials. This breathtaking vision of a metropolis made entirely of precious metal became the singular obsession of generations of treasure hunters. It suggested that a find here would not just secure a fortune, but rewrite history. To discover this city would be to find the American El Dorado, a prize that promised not just wealth, but eternal fame. This extreme description, this elevation of a mere deposit into a fully constructed city, is what drove men to risk everything. They were searching for proof that the earth itself could birth a glittering urban dream, a dream now perfectly shielded by the dense forest and the sheer geological complexity of Taum Sauk Mountain. The ultimate question remains who might have engineered this impossible city of silver. The most popular theory bypasses ancient civilizations and points directly to the era of Spanish conquistadors. These were men obsessed with silver, having already uncovered staggering fortunes in Mexico and South America. It is entirely plausible that Spanish miners or prospectors, driven by the same feverish need for wealth, ventured deep into the North American interior. They were seeking a hidden deposit so vast it would defy the crown's control. Imagine a small, highly organized group of Spanish adventurers stumbling upon the incredibly rich mineral deposits around Taum Sauk Mountain. They would need absolute secrecy to protect their find. If they reported a strike of this magnitude to the Spanish crown, they would be immediately subjected to strict royal taxation, potentially losing up to 1/5 of their entire output. The solution was simple yet audacious: establish a hidden mining operation far from any established trade routes or colonial oversight. This theory suggests that the lost Silver City was not a city in the traditional sense, but rather a monumental, camouflaged mining camp and processing center that eventually grew into a permanent settlement. They extracted the silver, refined it, and perhaps even built sturdy structures using the surplus ore as a foundation. They may have carved out roads and storage sites, creating a glittering, metallic village that was entirely self-sufficient. But why would they abandon such a phenomenal treasure? The answer likely lies in the danger of the deep wilderness. Transporting tons of refined silver hundreds of miles through territory controlled by potentially hostile indigenous tribes was a logistical nightmare. It is highly probable that as tensions rose, or perhaps as disease took its toll, the Spanish were forced to hastily bury or wall off their immense fortune and retreat, intending to return later when the area was safer. They left behind a massive undertaking, perfectly preserved in the unforgiving, dense landscape. Further cementing this Spanish connection are the supposed clues left behind. Generations of treasure hunters have claimed to find cryptic maps or deliberate landmarks pointing toward the lost settlement. These are often described as oddly carved stones or crosses cut into remote bedrock, symbols that are distinctly European and Catholic. One popular tale involves a stone map allegedly found in the area. showing precise celestial coordinates or unique trail markers that lead only to the hidden city. While none of these maps have ever stood up to rigorous scrutiny, they add a layer of tantalizing authenticity to the legend, suggesting that the city's location was deliberately concealed rather than simply lost to time. These markers fuel the modern hunter's resolve, providing hope that they are not just searching blindly, but following a carefully laid path toward an unimaginable prize. The crucial question is whether any tangible evidence of this massive undertaking ever emerged from the dense growth. Treasure hunters are not searching for legends alone. They are constantly seeking physical proof. Around Taum Sauk Mountain, the most frequently cited evidence for the lost Silver City is the existence of supposed ancient mine shafts and tunnels. Certain remote ravines and shadowed slopes are rumored to hold deep, narrow excavations that do not conform to modern mining techniques. These pits are often described as being crudely dug but strategically placed, suggesting Spanish engineering rather than later American claims. One particular spot, often whispered about among local enthusiasts, is located near the highest elevations, where the dense undergrowth conceals narrow vertical drops. Believers argue that these are not natural sinkholes, which are common in the Missouri karst landscape, but carefully concealed air shafts or test pits designed to follow a rich silver vein deep underground. These anomalies pose a fascinating challenge to geologists. Is it possible to distinguish between a centuries-old, hand-dug hole and a natural collapse feature? The Ozarks are riddled with caves and sinkholes caused by water dissolving the underlying limestone. A desperate prospector finding a perfectly circular, overgrown depression would almost certainly interpret it as the entrance to an old mine, especially if his mind was already captivated by the promise of a city of silver. The legend also claims that unique rock carvings and trail markers exist, serving as the final definitive proof. These are highly specific symbols, such as crosses, arrows, or even crude initials, allegedly cut into incredibly hard igneous bedrock near difficult-to-reach passes. These carvings are cited as the deliberate signposts left by the retreating Spanish miners, a silent map meant for their eventual return. When amateur archaeologists or dedicated adventurers discover these marks, the excitement is immediate and profound. A simple linear scratch in a stone face is instantly transformed into a Spanish numeral or a cardinal direction pointing toward the treasure. However, detailed archaeological scrutiny often reveals a less thrilling truth. Many of these apparent carvings are simply natural stress fractures in the ancient rock, or perhaps the faded marks left by much later American prospectors who were also searching for the mythic city. Yet, the ambiguity is the lifeblood of the legend. Even when the evidence is inconclusive, or when a feature is scientifically identified as a natural cave entrance, it is immediately co-opted into the narrative of the lost Silver City. The difficulty of accessing these sites itself becomes part of the proof. If it is hard to reach, it must be valuable. This cycle of hopeful discovery and scientific doubt ensures that the treasure hunt never truly ends, keeping generations focused on the mountain's hidden, alleged tunnels and secret markers. Yet, the most compelling evidence for the lost Silver City is not a vague carving or a sinkhole. It is the story of a lost Spanish soldier. Every great treasure legend needs an eyewitness, someone who almost touched the prize before it slipped through their fingers. The tale most frequently cited around Taum Sauk involves an unnamed or vaguely identified Spanish colonial soldier, sometimes a deserter, who became hopelessly separated from his unit in the early 18th century. Alone and starving in the deep Ozark wilderness, he was completely lost. The rugged terrain and dense forest had completely disoriented him. Just when he thought his journey was about to end in despair, he stumbled into a massive, sheltered bowl high in the mountains. There he saw it. This was not a natural formation, but a settlement. The soldier described seeing structures that seemed to absorb the light, reflecting a dazzling, metallic sheen, unlike anything he had ever witnessed. It was the Silver City, or at least the massive, concentrated heart of the Spanish mining operation. He claimed the very ground sparkled beneath his feet, and the buildings were composed of heavy, grayish-white stone that could only be silver ore. He may have sheltered there for a day or two, recovering his strength and marveling at the wealth around him. The city was abandoned, but clearly built to last. He tried desperately to mark the location, perhaps scratching symbols into trees or stacking stones, but exhaustion and confusion overtook him. When he finally managed to find his way back to a French settlement far to the east, he brought with him pieces of the glittering ore and a frantic, unbelievable tale of a city built of pure wealth. He recounted how he had been attacked or injured while retreating, the exact danger varying with the telling, which caused him to lose his memory of the precise route. He could describe the city perfectly, but he could no longer find the turnoff, the unique rock formation, or the specific ravine that led into the lost settlement. The trauma of the near-death experience had wiped clean the geographical memory needed to reclaim the staggering fortune. This soldier's powerful but frustratingly vague account gave the legend its greatest fuel. He wasn't just guessing. He had been there. He had seen the proof. The tangible ore samples he supposedly carried added weight to his claims, making his narrative impossible to dismiss as mere delirium. The tragic loss of the secret, the fact that the soldier could never return despite his knowledge, perfectly explains why the city remains lost. The vastness and uniformity of the Taum Sauk wilderness became the perfect warden, ensuring that even a successful visitor could never retrace their steps. This story transformed the search from a simple prospector's gamble into an urgent historical recovery mission. They knew the city existed. Now, all they had to do was follow the ghost of a lost soldier's memory and unearth the shining metropolis. The heartbreaking tale of the lost Spanish soldier collided head-on with cold, hard reality the moment a geological survey was conducted. Scientists and mineral experts have long studied the Taum Sauk area, and their conclusions present a daunting challenge to the lost Silver City narrative. To understand why this glittering metropolis is so unlikely, we must look at the actual mineral composition of the St. Francois Mountains. This region is immensely rich, but not in the way the treasure hunters hope. Missouri has historically been one of the world's most prolific producers of lead and zinc. Vast deposits of iron ore also underpin the bedrock here. These heavy metals fueled the growth of the state for 2 centuries. However, the presence of lead does not automatically guarantee massive amounts of silver. In the mineral world, silver is typically found only in trace amounts, often as a minor byproduct within the lead ore, or galena. Think of it this way: for every ton of heavy, valuable lead they mined, they might scrape out only a few ounces of silver. We are talking about small quantities, not enough to pave streets or build homes. The idea of a city built entirely of pure silver clashes violently with the current geological understanding of the Ozark subsurface. A geologist examining the region would point out that for a deposit large enough to sustain an entire silver city, the mineralogical signs would be absolutely unmistakable. There would be vast veins of native silver or extremely concentrated silver sulfide deposits that would dwarf anything ever found in the state. Such a spectacular anomaly would have been discovered long ago by intensive surveying. Yet, that definitive proof has simply never materialized. The science grounds the soaring myth, forcing us to ask a difficult question. If a massive silver deposit defies everything experts know about the Taum Sauk geology, how could the story persist? The answer is that the natural abundance of shimmering galena, the lead ore, created a persistent, powerful illusion. It provided just enough evidence of heavy, valuable metal to keep the dream alive. suggesting that the truly spectacular silver discovery was hidden just a few feet deeper, or just around the next ravine. This creates the ultimate conflict, the hope of unimaginable wealth pitted directly against the mineral maps of North America. The geological reality of the Taum Sauk area centers entirely on lead. For 200 years, Missouri has proudly worn the title of the lead state. This vast mineral wealth is the true treasure that defined the Ozarks and ultimately distorted the silver legend. Long before anyone was seriously hunting for a metropolis built of silver, countless prospectors were tearing into the earth to extract lead. The history of the state is literally built on the heavy, gray metal. Massive, rich deposits of lead sulfide, known as galena, were easily accessible throughout the St. Francois Mountains. This discovery spurred intensive mining operations, drawing hundreds of thousands of people to the region seeking their fortunes. Now consider the appearance of galena itself. When freshly mined, it has a brilliant metallic shine. It is heavy, looks valuable, and is definitely concentrated in massive quantities here. To an early European explorer unfamiliar with mineralogy, encountering a substantial vein of this glittering, heavy ore would be indistinguishably close to finding a vein of pure silver. It certainly looked the part. This visual confusion was the first step in the myth's continued growth. Prospectors may have genuinely mistaken the sheer abundance of galena for the legendary silver deposit. However, another, more cynical possibility exists. Imagine a small-time prospector in the 18th century attempting to raise capital for a dangerous, expensive lead mining venture. Who is going to invest heavily in a lead mine when the air is thick with tales of El Dorado and cities of pure gold? The savvy prospector could simply stretch the truth, promoting his rich lead claim not as base metal, but as a precursor or an indicator of the spectacular silver treasure. The silver fever was a fantastic way to attract investors. Say you found a rich lead deposit that yielded just a small, exciting trace of silver when refined. You could easily exaggerate that trace element into the promise of a massive, hidden silver motherlode. This blending of truth and exaggeration generated massive interest and funding for operations that were ultimately only about lead. It is important to remember how small the silver yield actually was. Silver is almost always present in galena, but in minute quantities. Mining companies would crush the raw lead ore, smelt it, and then go through a complex process called cupellation to separate the very small amount of silver from the much larger amount of lead. For every 100 pounds of lead they produced, they might recover just a few ounces of silver. It was a profitable byproduct, critical for making the lead mining even more lucrative, but it was absolutely not enough to build a city. The sheer scale of the lead mining, the overwhelming physical proof of massive mineral wealth, provided a perfect cover for the silver myth. The mines were real, the heavy metal deposits were real, and the small amounts of silver recovered were real. This provided just enough undeniable evidence to keep men searching for the fictional motherlode, always believing that the vast city of pure silver was hidden just beyond the next layer of galena. The mountain's power is not just a relic of history or folklore. It remains a formidable reality even in the 21st century. While treasure hunters obsessed over centuries past, the rugged nature of Taum Sauk was tragically underscored by a modern catastrophe that shook the entire state of Missouri. This event was the catastrophic breach of the Taum Sauk hydroelectric power plant reservoir in 2005. This failure had nothing to do with Spanish silver, but everything to do with the mountain's dangerous, wild, and unforgiving character. The power plant operated an enormous pumped storage reservoir near the summit. This reservoir was essentially a massive artificial lake holding millions of gallons of water high above the valley floor. On a cold December night, the enormous earthen berm holding the water failed spectacularly. Imagine a wall of water 1 billion gallons of it, suddenly ripping through the landscape in minutes. This was not a slow leak. This was a geological event caused by human error, unleashing a devastating flash flood down the steep slopes of the mountain. The enormous torrent of water tore through the state park below, destroying everything in its path, including the park superintendent's house. It was a terrifying reminder of the sheer force that the Taum Sauk terrain holds, demonstrating how quickly its rugged slopes can become an arena of utter destruction. This disaster, which caused massive damage and nearly took lives, provides a crucial contemporary lens through which to view the legend of the lost Silver City. The breach proved beyond a doubt that Taum Sauk is a place of extreme difficulty and deep isolation. If modern engineers, with all their advanced tools, could fail to tame this mountain and mistakenly unleash such power, then how easily could a secret city remain hidden and untouched? The dense forest, the vertical drops, and the difficult bedrock that resisted the floodwaters are the same features that have always protected the alleged Spanish settlement. The sheer scale of the landscape swallowed that catastrophic event, and today, only the scars remain to show the true power unleashed. If an entire modern reservoir can be built, destroyed, and rebuilt on this formidable peak, yet the alleged city remains lost, it reinforces the mountain's absolute mastery over human endeavors. Taum Sauk's wildness is not merely romantic, it is profound and even lethal. This contemporary drama reminds us that the mountain is still the ultimate guardian, perfectly capable of concealing its secrets indefinitely from those who underestimate its scale and its raw power. The raw power demonstrated by Taum Sauk did nothing to deter a new wave of desperate seekers. By the mid to late 1800s, especially after the American Civil War, the search for the lost Silver City transformed from isolated scavenging into highly organized corporate endeavors. America was expanding rapidly, and the promise of instant wealth fueled a speculative frenzy. Wealthy businessmen and eager investors, particularly from St. Louis, poured substantial funds into expeditions aimed at finally locating the Spanish treasure. These were the first systematic hunts, and they were often led by self-proclaimed prospectors and engineers who promised results. Their methods were a strange mix of rudimentary science and pure mysticism. Instead of carefully mapping the terrain, early teams relied heavily on crude dynamite to blast open what they believed were concealed mine entrances or tunnels. This destructive, often random approach further scarred the mountainside, creating more ambiguity for future searchers. They were essentially gambling with high explosives, hoping to accidentally hit a hidden vein or doorway. Alongside the dynamite came the divining rod, or dowsing, a practice that claimed to use bent wires or sticks to detect hidden metal underground. Organized teams paid expert dowsers high fees to walk the slopes, searching for the telltale flicker that supposedly indicated tons of silver lay beneath their feet. Imagine this scene: hardened miners, sweating under the Ozark sun, watching a man solemnly walk around with a thin piece of brass wire, claiming to be guided by unseen forces toward a lost city. They also depended heavily on unreliable local guides. These guides were often the descendants of early French or American settlers, and they had inherited fragmented, potentially decades-old tales of Spanish trails or unique carvings. These men were paid handsomely to lead expeditions deep into the most inaccessible parts of the wilderness, and their memories, usually vague and colored by folklore, led to countless false starts. The expeditions would often spend weeks meticulously digging based on a rumor about a distant grandfather who once saw a glimmering reflection. The result was a continuous cycle of financial desperation and deep disappointment. Fortunes were consumed by equipment costs, payrolls for the crews, and the endless expense of maintaining a base camp in the wilderness. Investors watched their money disappear into the dense foliage, waiting for the telegram that never arrived. the one announcing the discovery that would make them rich beyond imagining. When the expeditions inevitably returned empty-handed, they only had elaborate excuses and deeper holes to show for their efforts. Far from killing the myth, this failure only entrenched it. The sheer difficulty and the massive resources expended seemed to prove that the prize must be incredibly valuable. Otherwise, why would it be so hard to find? The systematic, organized failure of the 19th century prospectors demonstrated that the legend of the lost Silver City was no longer just a bit of folklore. It had become a consuming obsession that demanded serious, expensive resources. The mountain's failure to yield its secrets gave rise to a chilling explanation. The Silver City was not just lost, it was actively protected. Every great treasure legend eventually acquires a supernatural bodyguard, and the Taum Sauk myth is no exception. Local folklore is thick with tales of ghosts and a deep, ancient curse guarding the lost metropolis. Why else would such an obvious fortune remain undiscovered for so long? The search for physical evidence eventually blended with the fear of invisible forces. These frightening stories often involve the restless spirits of the very people who built or first discovered the city. Some accounts tell of the spectral forms of Spanish miners, the doomed men who supposedly buried the silver and never escaped. They are said to wander the most remote vertical ravines, appearing as shimmering lights or sudden, cold patches that drive away intruders. Adventurers who spent nights alone on the higher slopes reported hearing strange, deep humming sounds or the clanking of picks and shovels, phantom echoes of the long-abandoned mining operation. This isn't just spooky storytelling. It is an effective psychological deterrent. Imagine spending weeks in the utter isolation of the Taum Sauk wilderness, exhausted and fearful, only to hear the unmistakable sound of men working deep beneath the earth where no living person should be. This fear of the Spanish dead became a powerful argument for abandoning the search. Other legends point to the mountain's indigenous guardians, given that the Osage considered Taum Sauk profoundly sacred. Local myths sometimes warned that the spirits of ancient Native American protectors actively sought to prevent the exploitation of the land's resources. These spirits, sometimes described as fierce elemental entities, were said to cast a deep confusion over anyone who came with the intent of plunder. They would deliberately wipe the geographic memory of treasure hunters, causing them to lose their direction, their maps, and their ability to retrace their steps, exactly like the famous lost Spanish soldier. This persistent spiritual protection provides a convenient and intriguing explanation for the continuous failure of generations of expeditions. It suggests that the problem is not a lack of silver, but a fundamental lack of permission to take it. The silver is there, but a curse or a supernatural force prevents its discovery, ensuring that Taum Sauk Mountain retains its secrets, forcing modern seekers to reckon not just with the difficult terrain, but with the possibility of unseen, eternal guardians. The legendary protection of the Silver City may come from ancient curses, but the physical hope for its discovery rests in what are called the Taum Sauk inscriptions. These alleged cryptic carvings found throughout the mountainside are what treasure hunters focus on today. They believe these marks are the deliberate, directional clues left by the retreating Spanish miners, a silent map guiding them back to their hidden fortune. Decoding these clues becomes the ultimate quest. Proponents claim to have found dozens of unique characters and symbols cut into the hard rock faces of remote ravines. These inscriptions usually take the form of simple, unmistakable shapes, such as crosses, arrows, or even crude dates that seem to correspond to the Spanish colonial era. Imagine finding a cross carved into a boulder deep in a shadowy pass, seemingly pointing toward a hidden trail. This is the kind of tantalizing proof that fuels decades of searching. The cross, a powerful and obvious symbol of Spanish Catholicism, is easily interpreted as a trail marker or a boundary sign. The arrows, of course, are believed to point toward the deposit itself. But are these signs true Spanish carvings, or are they something much simpler? For every enthusiastic treasure hunter who assures us these are definitive proof, there is a geologist or an archaeologist who offers a far more mundane explanation. The ancient igneous rock of the St. Francois Mountains is subject to intense geological pressure. Over millions of years, this pressure, combined with weathering, creates natural fissures and stress fractures that can mimic intentional carvings. A naturally occurring, straight fault line in the stone, particularly when viewed through the desperate lens of silver fever, is instantly transformed into a deliberate arrow. Furthermore, we must remember the continuous search for this city for the last 2 centuries. Many of these suspected inscriptions are likely the work of later American prospectors who also searched the mountain, carving their own initials or trail markers into the stone. Perhaps a bored surveyor in the 1850s left a symbol that is now attributed to a Spanish soldier from the 1700s. The ambiguity is the real engine of the myth. When you stare at a symbol, attempting to decide if it is a genuine Spanish mark or just a crack in the granite, your hope often influences your decision. The lack of a definitive smoking gun, a clear, multi-line inscription in Old Spanish that gives precise coordinates, is replaced by the constant lure of these vague, compelling symbols. The Taum Sauk inscriptions remain the greatest source of hope and the greatest source of frustration, providing just enough evidence to keep the search alive, even as their true origins remain stubbornly locked in the mountain's geological history. The sheer tenacity of the Taum Sauk legend refuses to fade under modern scrutiny. Today, the quest for the lost Silver City has moved beyond crude shovels and unreliable maps into the digital age. Modern treasure hunting is no longer the lonely pursuit of a desperate man with a donkey. It is a highly organized, tech-savvy movement fueled by vast online communities and specialized forums. These digital spaces are where the cryptic Taum Sauk inscriptions are debated, where geological maps are shared, and where generations of family lore are digitized and scrutinized for the slightest advantage. Hunters now arrive armed with tools that their 19th century predecessors could only dream of. The biggest technological game changer is the combination of global positioning systems and advanced geological mapping. Modern seekers use highly accurate global positioning units to precisely locate and document every carving, anomaly, and rumored mine shaft, creating a massive shared database of potential clues. They overlay these points onto maps generated by light detection and ranging, a technology that uses laser pulses to create detailed 3-dimensional models of the terrain, effectively peeling back the dense tree canopy of Taum Sauk without cutting a single leaf. This allows them to spot subtle, unnatural terrain features that might indicate a walled-off Spanish road or a covered mine entrance, features invisible to the human eye from the ground. Many teams also employ ground-penetrating radar, hoping to detect large, non-ferrous metal deposits beneath the soil. The idea is simple. If a city of silver exists, ground-penetrating radar should reveal a massive, dense anomaly that simply cannot be natural rock. But the mountain is a formidable opponent even for these advanced tools. The complex, ancient geology of Taum Sauk, with its jumbled igneous bedrock and natural metallic ores, creates endless false readings and noise on the radar screens, frustrating even the most high-tech expeditions. Furthermore, modern hunters face entirely new challenges that prohibit the broad, destructive searches of the past. Much of the most compelling terrain on Taum Sauk is now part of a state park or designated wilderness area, meaning digging, blasting, or even extensive surveying is strictly forbidden under conservation laws. Other sections are protected private property. The sheer scale of the wilderness remains the greatest obstacle. even with a global positioning system, exploring every ravine, every cave, and every dense thicket on this massive mountain is a lifelong undertaking. The lost Silver City continues to evade capture, not because the technology is lacking, but because the location is perfectly protected by law, nature, and its own enduring enigma. The constant failure to find the shining metropolis leaves us with a critical question: where did the legend go wrong, and how much of this centuries-old mystery is based on outright deception? We have to face the cynical truth that not every ancient map was honest, and not every glimmering rock was silver. The relentless obsession and the vast amounts of money pouring into the Taum Sauk hunt created a perfect feeding ground for hoaxes and scams. For desperate men seeking fame or funding, it was far easier to manufacture a clue than to actually find the hidden city. The most common and most successful category of deception involved faked metal finds. Remember that the Taum Sauk area is full of galena, the lead ore that shines brilliantly and looks heavy and valuable. A savvy scammer could easily take a sample of this naturally occurring galena, which already contains minute traces of silver, and then artificially introduce a slightly higher concentration of silver dust or another precious element onto the surface. Presenting this doctored sample to a wealthy investor, claiming it was pulled from a new, incredibly rich vein, was a quick path to securing thousands of dollars for a mining expedition that was never intended to find silver. The investor thought they were buying into the next massive discovery when they were simply funding a lead mine, or worse, funding the scammer's own pockets. These hoaxes had a devastating ripple effect. Each time a fraudulent mineral sample was presented and subsequently debunked by real assayers, it did not destroy the myth. Instead, it simply added another layer of confusion to the narrative. People began to think only that the wrong spot had been dug, or that the real silver was simply hiding behind the fake silver. It kept the promise alive while draining fortunes. Even more damaging were the forged maps. Every treasure hunter fantasizes about finding a definitive, weathered piece of parchment pointing exactly to the spot. Local history is littered with tales of maps allegedly found hidden in old chests or passed down through generations of ancient families. These documents would often bear cryptic Spanish writing and rough drawings of the Taum Sauk peaks, complete with an X marking the spot. However, many of these maps were clear forgeries created in the late 19th or early 20th century. The motivation was usually notoriety or profit. Someone looking to make a name for themselves could easily dedicate a week to staining a piece of linen, drawing ambiguous symbols, and burying it near an old structure, only to dramatically discover it later. These fake maps were particularly appealing because they seemed to solve the problem of the lost Spanish soldier who forgot his route. They offered a definitive solution to a nebulous mystery. The consequences of these intentional deceptions were immense. For generations, well-meaning adventurers and serious investors followed clues that were fundamentally false, digging where they should not have dug and wasting resources on areas that held no promise whatsoever. This continuous process of searching based on faulty evidence is a critical reason why the lost Silver City remains lost. It is not always the mountain resisting discovery. Sometimes it is the deliberate human deception of those who try to profit from the shining fantasy. We must now ask whether the remaining clues are genuine geological anomalies or simply the final, unadulterated pieces of a spectacular lie. The hardest question facing the legend is not how the silver got there, but how an entire city stayed alive. Building an entire metropolis out of precious metal is an astounding engineering feat, but sustaining a population high on a rugged mountain is arguably the greater challenge. Every major human settlement requires a reliable source of fresh water, especially one involving intensive mining and smelting operations. Mining is a thirsty business, consuming massive amounts of water for cooling, washing ore, and dust suppression. For the lost Silver City to exist, hundreds or potentially thousands of people would have needed constant, clean water, yet Taum Sauk Mountain is notorious for its lack of surface streams high up its slopes. This logistic problem presents a severe stumbling block for the entire myth. If the Spanish built a permanent, self-supporting settlement, they must have solved this problem with a genius solution lost to time. One theory suggests they found a massive, hidden natural spring or an access point to an underground river system. The Ozarks are famous for their karst geology, meaning the bedrock is riddled with caves, underground rivers, and massive springs that feed into the valleys. It is entirely plausible that the Spanish, driven by their incredible find, dedicated massive resources to digging down to tap into this subterranean water supply. Imagine the sheer scale of that endeavor, sinking deep vertical shafts not for silver, but purely for survival, creating a hidden well protected by the dense surrounding rock. Another theory, one focusing more on Spanish colonial methods, suggests a reliance on sophisticated cisterns and water harvesting. This city might have been designed to capture every drop of rainfall and snowmelt, storing it in massive, sealed underground reservoirs. If the city was only intermittently occupied or used primarily as a processing center during favorable seasons, this could have sustained a smaller population. However, this is where the sheer remoteness of the site works against the idea of extensive water storage. Maintaining and protecting these large waterworks on a mountain prone to freezing and rapid runoff would have required constant maintenance and significant labor. If the city was truly abandoned, any above-ground cisterns would have quickly cracked and been rendered useless by the cold Missouri winters. The persistent lack of any clear, large, or historical water source near the supposed city location forces skeptics to question the entire narrative. A spectacular silver mine might exist, but a fully functional, prolonged settlement without a visible, sustained water supply high up the peak strains credulity. Finding the lost Silver City means also finding the lost water source, a secret that may ultimately prove harder to unearth than the silver itself. The sheer impossibility of the Silver City may actually be the reason the legend lives on. We have examined the geology, the failures, and the hoaxes, yet the story of the lost Silver City retains a magnificent, glittering grip on the consciousness of the Missouri Ozarks. To understand why this myth endures, we must step away from the maps and the shovels and look at the cultural heart of the region. Why does the Ozark identity cling so fiercely to the idea that a stunning metropolis of silver is just around the next bend? It comes down to two powerful human forces, the love of a good story and the deep psychological draw of a secret treasure. The Ozarks, particularly the St. Francois Mountains, are defined by a rich, deeply rooted, and often isolated culture. Generations of families have lived in the shadow of Taum Sauk, telling stories by firelight. These tales of hidden Spanish gold and vanished civilizations are not just history. They are woven into the fabric of community identity. Grandfathers passed down fragmented maps and whispered warnings about the mountain's dangers, making every child who grows up there a potential heir to the secret. The legend transforms the mundane, rugged landscape into a stage for grand adventure. It means that the dirt beneath your feet is not just earth, it is the potential roof of an unimaginable fortune. This idea elevates the local and gives the community a massive, secret significance. They are living atop a secret that the rest of the world has forgotten or failed to find. This brings us to the irresistible psychological allure of treasure hunting. Deep down, we all want to believe that there is a shortcut to incredible wealth, a reward that requires only tenacity and luck, not decades of hard work. The idea that fame and fortune are simply lying there, waiting for the one smart person who can solve the final riddle, is profoundly appealing. Think of the excitement of holding an old, yellowed piece of paper that might be the map. It offers the ultimate human fantasy, the chance to rewrite your history overnight. Furthermore, the very difficulty of the Taum Sauk wilderness adds weight to the legend. If finding this city were easy, it would have been found and forgotten. Because the mountain has swallowed fortunes and stumped countless experts, the remaining seekers believe that the treasure must be exponentially valuable. The failure of everyone else becomes proof of the prize worth. This persistent, compelling narrative is why the legend of the lost Silver City will likely outlive the final shred of geological hope. It is a story too perfect, too intoxicating, and too deeply rooted in the rugged soul of the Ozarks to ever truly vanish. The secret to the Taum Sauk legend might not be in the earth, but in the sky. If the geology of the Ozarks definitively proves there is no natural silver city, then where did those shimmering finds actually come from? There is a deeply intriguing alternative hypothesis that suggests the metallic fragments that first fueled the Spanish fever were not earthly treasure at all. They might have been visitors from outer space. This is the Taum Sauk meteorite theory. Meteorites, especially those classified as iron meteorites, are rich in heavy metals like iron and nickel. When such a fragment is freshly broken or cut, its surface can display a brilliant, silvery, metallic luster that is instantly striking. Imagine a novice prospector or an early settler stumbling across a heavy, beautiful chunk of this material, unlike any rock they had ever seen. Their immediate conclusion would be that they had found pure silver or an extremely rare and valuable ore, the likelihood of a major meteor strike in the ancient sun. Francois Mountains is certainly plausible, especially given the region's extremely old geology. The Earth has been struck by countless celestial bodies over its history, and metallic meteorites are known to survive impact, sometimes shattering into thousands of smaller pieces scattered over a large area, known as a strewn field. A significant impact event centuries ago could have peppered the high slopes of Taum Sauk with hundreds of these heavy, shimmering fragments. To an uneducated pioneer in the 1700s, finding continuous pieces of this dazzling metal would be concrete proof of a massive deposit of precious material. This theory neatly solves the fundamental problem of the legend. It explains the presence of highly concentrated, unusual metal finds without having to violate the established geological facts about the scarcity of silver in the Ozarks bedrock. These were not base metals, nor were they truly silver. They were exotic, non-terrestrial materials, valuable in their own right, but easily mistaken for the precious metal that obsessed the European explorers. It is highly probable that the original ore samples brought back by the lost Spanish soldier were actually these unique meteorite fragments, giving his tale the undeniable authenticity needed to launch decades of searching. The fragments were real, heavy, and metallic, but the assumption of them being pure silver was the critical mistake. This idea transforms the narrative from one of human error and greed into one of pure, awe-inspiring cosmic coincidence. Could the shimmering source of the entire lost Silver City legend truly be a gift from the stars, a celestial confusion that kept the secret safe for centuries? The possibility remains that the Taum Sauk legend is not a story of local discovery at all. Instead, the entire shining fantasy might be a story stolen from afar. What if the mythical Silver City of Missouri is simply a confused, geographically misplaced echo of an unimaginably successful silver mine built hundreds of years ago in South America? We need to explore the powerful Potosi connection. Potosi is a legendary name, a city in modern-day Bolivia that sits at the base of the Cerro Rico, or Rich Mountain. This mountain was not just rich, it was arguably the single greatest source of silver the world had ever seen. The Spanish Empire extracted staggering amounts of pure silver from this one location starting in the mid-16th century. The wealth pulled from the rich mountain financed global empires and fundamentally changed the world's economy. The very name Potosi became synonymous with infinite, spectacular mineral wealth. Imagine the rumor of Potosi traveling north through the Spanish territories and then into the French settlements along the Mississippi River. Storytellers would exaggerate the truth with every retelling. The actual mountain in Bolivia was so rich that it was said to defy belief. Over great distances, the tail of a rich mountain of silver easily morphed into the tail of a mountain where a city of silver was built. The reality of the overwhelming Bolivian mines easily provided the foundation for the mythical metropolis in Missouri. Furthermore, there is a specific local connection that could have cemented this confusion. In the eastern part of Missouri, there exists a town also named Potosi, known for its own rich lead deposits. This Missouri Potosi was a significant early Spanish and French mining center. The presence of a local mining town with the exact same name as the world's greatest silver city would have been a perfect storm of geographical ambiguity. It is easy to picture early prospectors hearing the sensationalized whispers of the lost city of Potosi. They know there is a Potosi nearby in Missouri, and they know the highest and most mysterious peak in their region is Taum Sauk. The two ideas likely collided in the frontier imagination. The overwhelming importance of the Bolivian Potosi was simply transferred to the rugged, high peak of the Missouri Ozarks. This narrative suggests that generations of treasure hunters were fundamentally looking in the wrong location, misled not by a deliberate deception, but by a simple, powerful linguistic and geographical confusion. The search for America's El Dorado was perhaps doomed from the start because the true place of spectacular silver was 7,000 miles south. This massive global context turns the Missouri mystery from a local anomaly into a fascinating example of how global legends migrate and mutate, proving that sometimes the true treasure is the story itself, even if it is badly misplaced. The mountain itself offers up features that look deliberately designed to hide a secret. The Taum Sauk wilderness is filled with striking geological formations, pieces of ancient bedrock that have been weathered and carved into dramatic shapes. For treasure hunters, these are not random rocks. They are definitive landmarks, mythic waypoints placed by the Spanish to guide the faithful back to their fortune. Chief among these interpreted clues is a famous site known ominously as the Devil's Toll Gate. This is a dramatic, narrow passage where enormous slabs of igneous rock stand vertically, forming a natural corridor or gateway. It looks precisely like a door built by a giant. For a prospector with silver fever, finding a colossal natural gate in the forest is an unmistakable sign that something important lies beyond it. The Devil's Toll Gate is widely interpreted as the main entry point to the secret approach road that supposedly leads only to the lost Silver City. The theory suggests that the Spanish, recognizing the monumental nature of this formation, used it as the first major threshold, a point of no return for anyone seeking the vast wealth. They may have carved subtle symbols or markers on the passage walls, symbols that have since blended back into the natural fissures of the rock or been worn away by centuries of weather. The very name, Devil's Toll Gate, adds to the mystery, implying a price must be paid or a test endured to pass through to the hidden world beyond. Beyond the toll gate, other unique rock formations gain instant significance. Local legends speak of the Three Sisters, a trio of unusually shaped boulders standing in a remote cluster, and the Whispering Cave, a large limestone shelter high on the mountain that seems to amplify the wind. Each of these unique geographical features is meticulously documented by modern hunters. The Three Sisters might be interpreted as a navigational alignment, perhaps pointing toward a specific star constellation that only appears at a certain time of year, thereby revealing the true direction to the city. The Whispering Cave, meanwhile, is thought to be an air shaft or breathing hole for the subterranean tunnels where the Spanish refined their silver, with the wind noise being the air rushing through the massive, hidden system. These features are essentially the mountain's own language, a secret code written in stone that generations of seekers have tried desperately to translate. What makes these features so compelling is their sheer distinctiveness in an otherwise uniform landscape of dense trees and rough terrain. In the middle of an endless forest, a giant stone doorway or a trio of unique boulders stands out immediately, providing the brain with the anchor it desperately needs to believe a map is real. To a skeptical geologist, these are simply beautiful examples of ancient rock structure and weathering. To the treasure hunter, they are the undeniable, silent sentinels guarding the path to the greatest lost fortune in North American history, proving yet again how hope transforms the very shape of the earth. Finding the Silver City would not mean instant riches after all, because the greatest challenge is not the mountain but the law. Even if a lucky adventurer managed to breach the mountain's defenses and unearth the glittering metropolis, the battle for ownership would just be starting. This legal nightmare highlights the difference between a frontier legend and modern reality, because in the 21st century, treasure belongs to complex jurisdiction and endless litigation. The first complication involves the very ground the city allegedly rests upon. A significant portion of the Taum Sauk area is protected state parkland, specifically Taum Sauk Mountain State Park. In the United States, treasures found on state-owned property generally belong to the state itself. If the Silver City were discovered beneath parkland, the finder would likely have no automatic claim to the immense wealth. Missouri would assert ownership in the name of the public, treating the discovery as an archaeological or historical resource to be preserved, not plundered. What about the private property scattered throughout the region? Even on private land, the rules are murky, resting on the complex legal concept of treasure trove. In simple terms, this refers to gold or silver that was intentionally hidden and later discovered. Under some interpretations of law, if the treasure is truly hidden and the original owner cannot be identified, the finder might have a claim. However, the sheer scale of a city made of silver immediately shifts the conversation from a few buried coins to a massive historical resource. Furthermore, because the legend points squarely at the Spanish colonial era, the federal government could instantly step in. The United States frequently asserts control over historical or archaeological finds that predate the nation's founding, especially those potentially tied to foreign governments or ancient civilizations. A Spanish city built of silver would be a massive historical site, a claim that would generate immediate federal interest, leading to decades of legal wrangling between the state of Missouri, the federal government, and the hopeful finder. Could the person who found it prove they were the rightful heir to the lost Spanish soldier? Not likely. The finder would face a brutal, expensive, and protracted legal fight against teams of government lawyers, all seeking to assert jurisdiction over the massive hoard. The final outcome would likely result in the finder receiving a modest reward or a percentage if they were lucky, but the immense wealth would remain tied up in vaults or put on display in a museum. The irony is staggering. Generations have risked their lives and fortunes to find the impossible city, yet the moment it is found, the greatest threat to their wealth becomes the civilized laws designed to protect historical resources. This legal reality turns the treasure hunt into a profound cautionary tale, proving that even if the myth is real, the freedom to claim the prize is a mirage. If the lost Silver City truly exists, what would it actually look like high on the rugged slopes of Taum Sauk? We must now engage in a compelling thought experiment. mapping the unseen metropolis based purely on the fragmented whispers and centuries of collected treasure lore. This city would not resemble a typical European or American settlement. It would be a fortress of necessity. Imagine a settlement tucked deeply into the mountain's folds, invisible from the valley floor. Its primary defense is not a stone wall, but the dense, unforgiving forest itself. Prospectors often describe finding a massive, sheltered bowl or a natural amphitheater high in the sun. Francois Mountains, a protected depression in the terrain where a settlement could thrive undetected. This city would be relatively small, perhaps a few hundred yards across, focused entirely on the mining operation. The structures would be thick-walled and low-slung, built from the most abundant material they could find, which in this fantasy is the concentrated silver ore itself. Picture houses built of massive, grayish-white blocks that shimmer under the sun, not brightly polished like silver coins, but radiating with the dull, heavy sheen of raw metal. The descriptions suggest these buildings would be positioned strategically around the heart of the operation, which would be the mine entrance itself, likely a network of shafts leading deep into the silver motherlode. Roads wouldn't be paved with pure silver, that is too extravagant, but perhaps they would be packed with crushed silver ore, creating streets that still sparkle underfoot. The most striking element, the centerpiece of the legend, would be the command structure or the assay office. This building, perhaps the only one made with refined silver cladding, would sit at the highest vantage point of the city. A church or a watchtower rising above the settlement, its copper roof may be plated with thin sheets of beaten silver. This single glittering point is the source of all the stories about reflections being seen from miles away. It would be visible only at a very specific time of day, when the angle of the sun was just right, acting like a fleeting, blinding beacon before the trees, and the terrain swallow it again. Its location must be near that elusive water source, perhaps a sealed well or a massive cistern system carved into the bedrock beneath the main plaza. The city would possess no elaborate defenses like battlements. Instead, the Spanish would have relied on a series of difficult, deliberately concealed pathways and tunnels leading up the mountain, pathways that required an intimate, expert knowledge to navigate. Removing these paths, blocking them with intentional landslides, or simply letting the forest reclaim them would render the city completely inaccessible. That is the genius of the lost city. It was not destroyed or conquered. It was simply swallowed by the wilderness it was designed to evade. Thinking about this hypothetical layout allows us to truly visualize the grand prize that fuels the endless search. It is a dream of a metallic sanctuary, perfectly hidden and built with an impossible wealth. The impossible metropolis built of silver remains a stunning paradox. We have journeyed through centuries of folklore, followed the trails of lost soldiers, and considered the cold, hard realities of Ozark geology. Now the time comes to weigh the evidence. On one side of the scale lies the undeniable truth of the mountain. Scientific surveys and mineral maps tell us definitively that Taum Sauk is a powerhouse of lead and iron, but it is not a mountain of silver ore. The sheer geological improbability of finding enough silver to pave streets, let alone build an entire city, is overwhelming. Every supposed ancient mine shaft can be explained as a natural karst feature or a later American test pit. The glittering samples were most likely misleading galena, or perhaps even fragments of a celestial visitor, a meteorite. Hard science grounds the legend, suggesting that the lost silver city is, in its magnificent entirety, a myth. Yet, the other side of the scale holds the powerful weight of human obsession and persistent folklore. This is the weight of the lost Spanish soldier's tale, the countless cryptic carvings, and the sheer tenacity of generations who failed to find the prize yet still believed it existed. The myth of the city has survived every failed expedition, every scientific debunking, and every cynical hoax. It persists because it is a perfect story, one that explains the difficulty of the Ozark wilderness and gives meaning to the unyielding grandeur of the mountain. We are left with a fundamental choice: to trust the data of the earth or the enduring dream of humanity. While definitive, irrefutable proof of the glittering settlement is still missing, the power of the legend is proof enough of its existence in the collective imagination of the Ozarks. The mountain still beckons, a silent, powerful guardian of potential truth. Taum Sauk continues to hold secrets, not just of silver, but of human ambition and failure. The search for the lost Silver City has transformed from a frantic scramble for riches into an enduring cultural quest. Future adventurers will inevitably arrive, armed with better technology and the same unshakable hope, looking for that one faint glimmer of metal that escaped everyone who searched before them. Whether they seek a fortune in bullion or simply the thrill of solving one of North America's greatest historical mysteries, the hunt will continue. The Taum Sauk Silver City is Missouri's most cherished enigma, a shining, persistent question mark that refuses to be erased from the map. The true value of Taum Sauk Mountain was never the city of silver. We have followed the legend across centuries, tracking its evolution from ancient Osage whispers about shimmering rock to the desperate, tech-driven hunts of today. The journey itself reveals the real prize hidden in the dense Ozark heartland. It is not a fortune in bullion, but a treasure trove of rich history, cultural folklore, and the persistent, undying spirit of adventure. The mountain stands today as a monument to human hope and failure, a place where the simple desire for wealth collided with the brutal reality of the wilderness. This legend has preserved stories of early Spanish ambition, given context to Native American reverence for the land, and fueled the economy of the lead state for generations. Every failed search, every vague carving, and every wild theory about meteorites or misplaced South American lore has simply added another brilliant layer to the overall narrative. Taum Sauk provides a necessary reminder that history is not always what is written in textbooks. Sometimes, the most compelling truths are those that exist in the space between cold fact and hopeful myth. The story of the lost Silver City asks us to reflect on why we search for treasure at all. Is it truly for the money, or is it for the thrill of the quest, the satisfaction of solving a spectacular puzzle left by the past? The mountain ensures that the mystery remains perfectly unsolved, perpetually inviting the next seeker to try their luck. The silver itself might be a mirage, but the inspiration it provides is profoundly real and enduring. The greatest reward is the continuing adventure itself, the feeling that greatness and untold mysteries are still hidden just around the next bend. We want to know what you think. Do you believe the lost Silver City is actually hidden deep within Taum Sauk, protected by a curse or a cunning disguise? Or is the entire thing a beautiful geological confusion? Share your own theories and evidence in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the greatest historical mysteries.